Hello, everybody. My name is Marley Chea, and I am an advocate supervisor at Women in Distress of Broward County. Today, I will be giving a short presentation on some of the work that we actually do that overlaps with the child dependency system. So before I get started, just a little bit of background about how there is a connectedness between Women in Distress and dependency system. We are actually a certified shelter, the only certified shelter in Broward County through DCF. We do have a team of advocates that works very closely with the dependency system that we'll get into a little bit later. But all of our services are open for any survivor and their family of Broward County. So just to dig into a little bit of background of the DCF perspective on domestic violence. The Safe and Together model was established through DCF. So it was an internationally recognized set of tools and interventions designed to help the child welfare professionals become domestic violence informed. It does derive from the concept that we want to try to keep children together, safe and together with their non-offending parent. So when we think about it in the context of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, we try to find the parent who the child would be safest with, the one that is not bringing violence into the home. So it does provide a framework for all the partnering agencies to work together to intervene, to actually hold perpetrators more accountable, and to try to avoid the re-victimization of survivors as they move through the dependency system. And this kind of gives a little bit more, again, it's a very generic breakdown of the Safe and Together model, but it's a little bit about the principles of which Safe and Together model stands. So children ideally should be safe and together with their non-offending parent. So again, the focus is on the child, the focus is on healing from the trauma and safety and stability. It also, the other principle of it is partnering with the non-offending parent should be the default position of anybody working in the dependency system. So unless otherwise indicated, the non-offending parent is who we should be as providers focusing on as developing safety plans and protective capacity and building on those or identifying those protective capacities with the non-offending parent. So the partnership also depends on a comprehensive assessment of the non-offending parent's strengths. This again goes to identifying those strengths, identifying the protective capacities, and building on those to make a plan for safety moving forward. And the last step would be to intervene with the perpetrators to reduce the risk to children. Our perspective at Women in Distress and when understanding intimate partner violence is that the violence is generated from the abuser, and we want to try to hold that person accountable for bringing that behavior into the home and actually presenting the harm and threat to the child and their well-being. So we want to conceptualize the tactics and the abuse, and we want to make it visible to be able to hold them more accountable. And as a system of providers, we want to be able to make that a concrete effort in each of the cases that we see. So where we come together. So we work with the survivor and the children as well as service providers to appropriately assess for risk and develop both the confidential survivor focus safety plan and the child safety plan for the whole family whenever there's intimate partner violence. This is a big piece of what our co-located advocates will do. They focus more on the systematic approach when it comes to case management. So we try to assess for risk in a systematic way so that each domestic violence case that comes in, we can look at it through the same lens and be able to come out with some sort of safety plan for the family so that they can use that in their case management. Also to engage in discussions around caregiver protective capacities from a strength-based and trauma-informed perspective. Again, this comes from the Safe and Together model, like we just talked about. And then to work with other service providers so that we are reducing the barriers for survivors to get those services, to get either away from the abusive parent or to establish some safer boundaries within that context and the dynamic of that family as it exists in order to stay together as a unit. There will be a lot of barriers that the survivor has to face, both systematically and perpetrator generated risks, but it's up to, it's one of the things that we can do as service providers is to be able to step in and at least take some of the load off of the survivor for carrying that the entire weight of making all those changes and getting through those barriers. So some of the services that we provide directly from Women in Distress as part of our commitment to serving survivors in the dependency system is advocacy. So we work with participants to provide resources and referrals to agencies in the community. We do have, for example, our injunction for protection attorneys. It is a very specialized team of attorneys that works from beginning to end, getting someone an injunction for protection. Technically, the injunction for protection attorneys can work on all sorts of domestic violence injunctions, so they don't even necessarily always need to be intimate partner violence to qualify for the IFP program. But of course, if they come through our outreach or if they come through residential, they would have had to have had that extra element of intimate partner violence. And so we connect them with those services. If our injunction attorneys are unable to represent them, they still provide counseling, legal counseling that we aren't able to provide. Our advocates are all versed in trauma-informed care. So all the interactions that we have, not only is it privileged information, but we all are trauma-informed, and it comes from that empowerment-based approach. So all of our resources and referrals are looked at through the lens of what is going to get, what are the goals we call participants, what are the goals the survivor has for them, and a lot of times that will overlap with their case management plan as they move through the dependency system. So we try to identify the most appropriate resources and referrals, whether it's financial assistance, just to get them by from day to day. So we have resources on food banks, on other legal services, if their legal needs exceed the injunction parameters and they might need family law assistance. Most of the time when people come in to receive services, they know what it is that they're looking for. So we try to go based off of what they know they need in order to get from point A to point B safely. We also provide psychoeducational groups and one-on-one sessions. So most commonly when we get cases from the dependency system, whether they come from child protective investigators or they come from the child advocates at ChildNet, one of the the biggest requests that we get is for the DV-101 or some sort of psychoeducational group on domestic violence. So the background on domestic violence, what is the impact, the dynamic of power and control, understanding healthy and unhealthy relationships and boundaries, how domestic violence impacts children, and then how to make those next steps forward, how to move away from that cycle of abuse and to move towards that healing and surviving for the survivor and the child. We also offer parenting. Our curriculum is evidence-based. But it does not have the component of a pre and post test at this point. We have been looking into other ones, but for now, our parenting course, while it is evidence-based, has been helpful in the non-judicial cases. We also provide individual therapy. Again, trauma-informed therapy for all of the therapists that are here. We have therapists that also run support groups. So that is another element of processing. Sometimes it's offered through the case plans for survivors, or participants might be court-ordered to participate in a group. So this would be where our therapists will step in that manner to help with that level of individual care. And then ongoing support. So once we have registered someone for services, our services are always open to them. Even after their case independency has stopped, we continue to be whatever kind of support that person needs. Again, it comes from the empowerment model, and what we know about trauma is that there's a lot of different ways to heal, and everyone heals in a different way. So our goal is to maintain that support as it's needed. So even if their case might be closed, there might be support groups that they're open to afterwards. So there is no end unless they no longer need us. So where you would see us, how you can get in touch with us, how you can reach us. The crisis line is basically our front door to our emergency shelter, but also information and referrals. So if you do happen to call the crisis line, we have advocates that can answer that will give you information and resources. They will direct you to outreach services if you do not qualify for the residential services, or they will assess you for our residential program. So our emergency shelter, what we always tell people is that it should be a last resort, and it should be recommended for high lethality situations. So what we hope to do is get someone through the doors before they absolutely require a shelter. So that's where our outreach center comes into play, and a lot of where our advocates participate in the community. So the advocates that are co-located at ChildNet and at the CPIS office, those advocates hopefully will catch those cases before it escalates into a situation of high lethality where someone would need an emergency shelter. And we say that it should be a last resort because it really is very short term and is for very high lethality situations. So we try to do most of our work on the front end through our outreach programs and our outreach services, like our individual therapy, like our support groups, and our other advocacy services. And how you can reach all of those services, our crisis line, as I mentioned before, is our front door to the emergency shelter. So the intake is also done through that emergency line, and our administrative line is also here. So you can call and set up your survivor or your client can call and set up an appointment with one of our advocates. Even if they have just questions or concerns, that's definitely something that we are available to and open for. And that is Visit in a nutshell. Thank you very much.
I have a question. This is Sky from Broward Behavioral Health Coalition.
Yes,
How do you guys interact with Child Protective Investigations and ChildNet? What does that look like?
So our team, like I said before, we have our co-located advocates, which basically just means that they're there for the analysis of any cases that come in for domestic violence or intimate partner violence threatens child. Whatever that is, we have two advocates that will sit at the BSO CPIS office, and when cases come in, they get referred to those advocates for our advocates to then reach out. Our advocates are also available to go out to the homes alongside the investigators to help with safety planning, to help with identifying the tactics that make it hard for a survivor to leave, to help the survivor safety plan in the moment, but sometimes also just to be that warm handoff. Sometimes, when CPIS shows up and there's a lot going on at the house, sometimes it gets very overwhelming, and when services are offered, they're not always remembered the next day. So putting a face to a name and having that warm handoff between the incident and connecting to services is sometimes really beneficial. So our advocates are available for that as well. Advocates participate in some of the staffings so that they can consult on cases where domestic violence is a part of the case and a part of the dynamic in the family. And we also have an advocate that works really closely with the child advocates at ChildNet. And so her role is a lot more systems-based as well, where she does sit in on the permanency staffings and does go to court, does do the court accompaniment, and does offer some of the services individually, as far as individual counseling and the group as well, the Domestic Violence Transformations group. And referrals come in from the child advocates as well, because sometimes cases will come in through CPIS where no domestic violence has been identified at all. But then as the child advocate is working with the case maybe over a year, maybe that comes out a little bit later and consults with our advocate that's there. on what to do and how to safety plan for that situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you. One more question, Marley. If someone, and this is Sky from our Behavioral Health Coalition again, if someone needs to, like a provider agency, needs to access women in distress with a client or mom or dad, what's the best number to call? Is it the crisis line or the outreach center?
So the best number to call would be the outreach center, but we also have, and it's something that I can make available to everyone, is the community referral form. So it's just a form that helps us understand where the referral is coming from, but also which department it might need to get directed to. So we actually have an adult department and family services department. Most of the time, if they're coming in through the partnership that we have with you all, they will go straight to our family services department because there's a child involved.
Okay, great. Thank you, Marley. I really appreciate it.
Max, please call 1034. Max, please call 1034.
And where would I be able to find that family services referral form? Is that on your main website?
It is not on the main website, but I can make it available. I'll make it available after this, but I can also look into putting it on the website, because that makes a lot of sense to put it there.
Great, thank you, Marley. I want to go ahead and thank Marley from Women in Distress for this very informative presentation. You will see a link attached to this video with the referral form. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day. Hold.